Governor Doug Burgum has, well, I want to call it, it's an aggressive move. What he's doing is, let's turn back the clock a little bit. When he was first elected to office, Governor Burgum ran on a campaign, 2016, ran on a campaign where he talked a lot about the good old boys club in Bismarck. He talked about entrenched lawmakers. I mean, he really campaigned as much against sort of at least a faction of the Republican status quo in North Dakota as he did against his Democratic opponent that year, State Representative Marvin Nelson. Upon taking office, there has always obviously been some hard feelings between the legislative branch and Governor Burgum's administration. And we've seen it crop up in many ways, some of them kind of petty. At one point, Governor Burgum was removed from the floor of the state Senate because he wasn't meeting the dress code, which I don't know if we need a dress code in the legislature beyond, like, don't show up naked or in your underwear. But beyond that, I think you're okay. In all other ways, more serious. In the last legislative session in 2019, there was a move by lawmakers to sort of sideline Governor Burgum's executive budget, to not really sort of include it in as robust a way as past governors' executive budgets were included in the budgeting process. Well, now we flash forward to the 2020 campaign season, and it's clear that Governor Burgum feels like he has some scores to settle. Some of his staffers have, former staffers, I should say, Robbie Loff, who ran Governor Burgum's 2016 campaign, as well as Levi Bachmeyer, who, although he works for the West Fargo Public Schools now, was a policy advisor to Governor Burgum. They have started a political action committee that I think it's called the Dakota Leadership PAC. I should have had it printed out in front of me, but anyway, they started a political action committee. I've been writing about it recently, and they're raising big money, including nearly $200,000 from Governor Burgum's own fortune, as well as a lot of money from a number of his friends, a lot of money coming from out of state, and they're now using this political action committee to intervene in local legislative races. Now, it's not unusual to see sort of statewide elected officials, particularly members of Congress and the statewide officials, donate money down to those more local races. But the way Governor Burgum's doing it is he's getting involved in the primaries, and he is targeting sitting incumbent lawmakers. One of them is Jeff Magrum in District 28. Another one is Jeff Delzer in District 8. Jeff Delzer, by the way, a very long-time, very powerful lawmaker, is the chairman of the House Appropriations Committee and has long, probably one of the most influential people when it comes to North Dakota writing its budget, one of the most influential policymakers in the state, and also sort of the organizer behind what I just mentioned about Governor Burgum's executive budget being marginalized. So Governor Burgum, he's come out swinging. He's using a ton of his own money. He's using big donations from a lot of his friends, many of which are out of state, to intervene in these local races, which in some cases the local party has, I know certainly in District 28, as an example, and by the way, it's more than just those two districts. It's a lot of districts across the state. It's also the treasurer's race. These are all competitions among Republicans. These are competitions for the Republican nomination. In Representative Magrum's case, in District 28, he was endorsed by the local NDGOP committee. So that's local Republicans saying, this guy's our guy. The Republicans in District 28 saying, this guy's our guy. But he's got a challenger, Jim Greenwich, he's currently a lawmaker from Jamestown, but he's moved into District 28. He has Governor Burgum's backing but didn't get the backing of his local district. So this is a very provocative move. Here to talk with me about all that is former NDGOP chairman Gary Emineth, who has informed me that he's formed his own political action committee and has also told me he doesn't much like what Governor Burgum's doing. Gary, thanks for coming on. Tell me, what are your thoughts here?
You're welcome, Rob. I'm glad to talk about this. I'm really, I was a big Doug Burgum supporter in the last campaign, as you well know.
Well, I know you were, and I was not. So,
yeah, we had a few little battles over that. But at the end of the day, this is such overreach by Governor Burgum. It's got me so frustrated that somebody's got to push back on this. And I decided to form my own PAC. Now, I'm not going to have Doug Burgum's couple $100,000 that he's done and his out-of-state special interest funding the campaign against this. But for the governor to cross over and use his fortune to unseat sitting incumbents is just outrageous. And so we're going to put this, I started it. I'm putting together this North Dakota First PAC. And we're going to get involved and help Jeff Delzer in this case. I'm a former District 8. This is a district, it's rural. And at a time like this, where the governor's going to cross using his wealth as an executive in the state to go after the legislature and specific candidates that are sitting incumbents is just wrong. I don't think our founders of our republic had any intentions of that. That's why there was checks and balances with the balance of power. And it's just a conflict of interest. And I just think that somebody's got to push back. And, Jeff Delzer and Jerry Magrum, God bless them for fighting back and related to this. But for the governor to do this, it's just plain wrong. I don't think you've ever seen Ed Schaefer or John Hoeven do any of this stuff previously, in campaign depth. I don't recall any of this happening. But to actually do this is just plain wrong.
Well, let me intervene here because I think there's two distinct issues here. One issue is, do you like Jeff Delzer or do you like Jeff Magrum? Right, that's one issue, and that's just normal politics. You like some people, you don't like other people. You think some people will be better for the job. Honestly, I'm having a hard time with Jeff Delzer. I really do. I think some of his approach. I know he's got a lot of supporters, but some of his approaches to budgeting, where he likes to hide money so that we don't spend it, as opposed to just having honest and transparent accounting, and then making a fiscally conservative argument for what to do with the money. Honestly, I think is counterproductive. I don't think he's that fiscally conservative. I think he's got this thing he likes to wear as a badge of honor, that he's this tight-fisted guy, and he really rides hard on the budgets, and in many ways he does. But I don't like it. I think he's grown a little arrogant. I think it's time for some fresh blood there. That's my personal feelings. I'm not a member of District 8. I'm not going to get to vote in that election at all. I've already voted in my district up here in Minot. But just as a North Dakotan, I think it's probably time for some fresh blood there. That's one issue, right? I'm free to say that Jeff Delzer shouldn't be, Jeff Magrum shouldn't be in office. Some of the things these guys have done, I think probably they could be replaced by somebody's better. We could have a debate about that. The other issue is we have a governor with a very large personal fortune who doesn't like what the legislature's doing, and so he's saying, you know what, we're going to defeat some of these people in the legislature. Again, that's a provocative move. But it
is. It really is.
But is it?
I'm sorry.
But I mean, because you just said, well, it's not really what the founders would have intended or whatever. But there's nothing illegal. I mean, they're doing it all right out in the open. There's nothing illegal about it. He's just isn't he just playing the game?
Well, I think he's crossing the line when you start using your money to start influencing and going after people that you want to. He to me in effect, he's going after his good old boy. He's actually creating his own good old boys club by doing this kind of thing, and I think it's wrong. And the citizens of each of the districts who vote their people in ought to be driving it. And when you have a situation like we have this time around, without getting lost in the weeds, but all the vote by mail, and because of the coronavirus and all these things that are occurring, it's making it very difficult, the process, to be where people are involved at the district level. And for the governor put his team of young guys together, and I like both Robbie and Levi, good guys. But, I mean, it's a little bit much when you go in and take all this money from the governor and begin to go after guys. Well, that was plain wrong that are sitting incumbents. Because if the district wants elected people endorse them, they should do it. But to come in and Shanghai the convention and bring in people that have never been involved and to be actually organized to that degree, they showed up with bottles of water with the names of the candidates on. This was a well-orchestrated takeover of District 8.
So what, though? I mean, haven't the Bastiots? I mean, Jeff Magrum. I don't know that Jeff Delzer is, but Jeff Magrum, Dan Johnston. I mean, they're members of the Bastiot caucus who have done that exact sort of thing, and they get their people to show up. I mean, isn't that we're governed by who shows up? If you get your people out and get them to show up, hey, that's the process.
Yeah, but it's a little different, I think, when you're talking the governor, the executive branch crossing over. That's really the point I'm after, why I'm frustrated with Governor Burgum over this, because he's got his, so what message is he sending to the legislature when he goes down next session and he starts lobbying on certain legislative issues. And let's say these guys all get beat that the governor supports. And when he's doing 4, 5, 6, 8 mailings and radio ads attacking these guys, what legislator is going to be sitting in the next session when the governor sends his staff down to lean on the legislator to support a bill? Everybody's going to be looking over their shoulder and wondering if I'm next. And that's just not the way it should be with the executive branch of the legislature. I just think it's wrong, bad precedent. And
but don't we all have a right? And I'm playing. Listen, I will tell you. I don't know if you read my column earlier this week. I think it was where I went through and I noted, some of who these people are, who's getting the money in. That looks unseemly to me. And I had a long conversation with Robbie Loff about it too on the phone. And I told him, I said, listen, I'm generally kind of on your side, at least in some of these races. I just don't. The way you're doing it is ham-handed. You're gonna make enemies where you don't need to make enemies. So I don't necessarily agree with the tactic, but I have a hard time just saying that this is, the executive branch shouldn't cross over. What governor hasn't wanted to cultivate friends and undermine their enemies in the legislature? I mean, isn't that the process? Why can't Governor Burgum say, listen, these are the people I support. These are the sort of people that are going to support my agenda in the legislature. Why can't he do that? He's not being subtle about it.
Yeah. I guess the problem with it is the battle inside of this. We go back to 2016 and how much Governor Burgum spent on his campaign to beat Wayne Stenjum. And he uses money that happens all over the country, and everybody has a right to do that if they want to use their wealth to do that. But I just believe that it sets a precedent, back to my point, that legislators next session, the governor is going to send people down there to lobby on particular legislation he wants. It's one thing to do it and that's kind of in the trenches. That's where a process is supposed to work. But when you take the kind of money he's put into this and they've raised to target a few races, I mean, what's he going to do? Now he's involved in the treasurer's race, and what's going to happen is he begins to put his fingerprints on all these other races that may occur in 2022 and 2024. And legislators, I think, are going to feel a tremendous amount of pressure. And my hope is they push back harder against him in this session for pulling shenanigans like this, because I think it's wrong. Now, he has a right to be involved, and he ought to lobby for his position. That's why he was elected, and that's why people supported him, like myself. But when you start taking your money and using that amount of money to going after very specific races where districts should be making those decisions, I think it's wrong. Now, if Robbie Lopp and Levi wanted to go do this and want to raise some money, and if the governor's doing $5,000 and some of his ex-staff did it, that happens all the time in politics. But $200,000 of his own money and another couple $100,000 from other outside interests, that is a lot of money, goes a long way in a local legislative race, especially a primary race. And so there's a lot of things that can happen between the phone calls and to get out to vote and all the mailings that's spent in a primary. It's crazy.
But can't the governor come back though and say, listen, the legislature's done. The legislature sued him. And honestly, I thought that was a good debate to have. I mean, we're always having a debate about the limits of legislative power versus executive power versus judicial power. I mean, the separations of power debate is baked in to our form of government, and I think it's a healthy thing. But the legislature sued him. The legislature, he could say that was a heavy-handed thing they did with his, kind of sidelining his executive budget that Jeff Delzer did. I mean, can't the governor say, listen, legislature wanted to play hardball. All right, let's play hardball.
Well, there's no question. In my mind, it's all about this budget issue. It's not about the library. It's about the budget issue, and the governor is sending a message to the legislature. There's no doubt about it. And he's got a right to be lobbying any way he wants to for any position, and I support all of that. That's the way the system works. It just comes down to me is the money that's being spent in the primary in these circumstances, as it is now, is going to be very difficult for Jeff Delzers. And I think these guys are going to have a hard time overcome the money being spent by Burgum and what comes in 2022. That's just so. Part of the reason I'm starting this PAC is I'm saying the Democrats are irrelevant in any of these processes. So that's where the checks and balances should occur with the other opposition party. But right now, it's all happening within the Republican ranks because they don't matter. I mean, there's a few races here and there where there's a little bit.
Especially you start getting out western, like in Underwood, the Democrats are basically non-existent. Here's the thing. I'm not that worried about this. I think it's good that we're all talking about it. That's why I wrote about it, because I wanted to shine a light on it, because I think people should be aware this is happening. I don't necessarily approve of it, but I think that's the part, because I saw a tweet from sort of Chad Hoban used to be executive director of the North Dakota Democratic Party. He put out a tweet, and it was sort of snarkily saying, I can't wait for all these conservatives to get in favor of campaign finance limits. I'm paraphrasing what he tweeted, but basically it was that. All these conservatives complaining about Doug Burgum spending. I can't wait for them to start supporting limits on spending. And frankly, I don't think we need them. I think that this probably, what Governor Burgum is doing, I think is probably not going to work as well as he thinks it is. And part of the reason why is because we do have transparency laws in place. And by the way, I do think some of our campaign reporting could be a lot more timely and a lot more thorough. Yep. But we do have some, and it has allowed us to shine a spotlight. And I've written about it, and others have written about it and spoken about it. So we're all aware that it's happening, and we can see that it's happening, and the voters are aware that it's happening. And I think it's going to turn a lot of voters off. And it's not going to end up working as well for Governor Burgum as he'd like to think it will, or that Robbie Loff and Levi Bachmeyer like to think it will. And that'll be at that point, the system will have worked as far as I'm concerned. Governor Burgum tried a tactic, and the voters, I think the voters are gonna a lot of them are gonna reject it.
Yeah, I hope they do. If the word gets out enough, then I think that's the case. Maybe with people staying home a lot more, they're more in tune to the news of what's going on. But, to hide behind Robbie Loft's comment, I think it's kind of laughable where he said this PAC was formed to help elect conservative Republicans. Now, he did say he didn't include the caveat who share the governor's vision. I get that. But the idea that the people that they're targeting are all conservatives and they're going to elect more conservatives, I think it's more – they're looking for that more moderate populist view within the party, and that's part of the reason, I'm moving forward to grow this PAC more beyond than just this primary race to get started, because we're going to do what we can. I think there's a point in time where the movement of some form of a Tea Party, but not necessarily the Tea Party, but there's a group of people pretty disenfranchised with politics in general, and they're wanting to be involved, and the party structure does not always work in that framework where you got insiders kind of
isn't that kind of what the Bastiats are? Like I keep referring to this, for people who don't know, the Bastiat caucus is a caucus within the Republican Party, within the legislature, and lawmakers are members of it, and it's become almost sort of a rump party within the NDGOP. I think is that fair to say? And I go back because ideologically, I mean, you know me, Gary. You've been following my work for years. Yep. Ideologically, I should align with the Bastiats. The problem is I have a problem with, I look at some of the members. We had the big blow up with Ole Larson and his comments about Ilhan Omar, which I have no love at all for Ilhan Omar, but I think that those sorts of comments are unhelpful. Dan Johnston, who's running for treasurer, who Governor Burgum is backing Tom Beadle in that primary race, but Dan Johnston has some things that he's written on Facebook in the past that are extremely inappropriate. I have Jeff Hoverson, state representative from up here in Minot, was opposed to a Hindu person delivering the invocation at the legislature, which seems odd for conservatives who are supposed to be in favor of religious liberty. It was the Bastiat caucus that were a lot of members, I don't want to say all of them, but a lot of them that were urging Will Gardner to continue with his campaign for Secretary of State last cycle when it was revealed that he had been a window peeper at North Dakota State University. So I'm looking at the Bastiats and I'm thinking, do better. I'm not sure. I understand what you're saying, that the NDGOP has become so large and so dominant in state elected office that this sort of faction is inevitable. And ideologically, I align with the Bastiats, but some of the personnel they're touting and some of the things they're asking us to overlook, I just can't.
Yeah. But I do think there's challenges within the party to manage through this because they've been in power for so long. And I'm a Republican, but I'm a conservative first. And I believe there will be some factions that are going to come out of this governor doing this. And it might be a conservative, but there's a power play going on in the state, in the Republican circle, where the more moderate wing, and it goes back to what came out with, Mike Nathy running. Mike's a friend of mine. I don't want to take anything away from Mike. He used to be more conservative, in my opinion, than he is, than he shows today. But I think there's some factions occurring, and it's going to ultimately cost the Republican control of probably not the legislature, but definitely for sure some statewide offices in time, because the battles are occurring in there and bringing a lot of people getting involved that I would say are more, quite a bit more liberal, almost center left, but you can never get elected when it comes down to in many of these districts anymore. But Republicans are going to pay a price for this transition from Trump to the next Republican presidential race in 2024 is going to be very interesting to see how that plays out in North Dakota politics, whether Doug Burgum runs again for his third term, which there's no reason he's not going to win this time. So what happens in that next transition, I think what you're seeing, Rob, is the beginning of the jockeying in North Dakota for who are the next leaders going to be driving the legislature and along with statewide offices in 2024. That's what's going on right now.
I think you're absolutely right. Here's my prediction, though, because you've been involved in state Republican politics a lot longer than I've been writing about politics, but it's been 17 years for me. And I can remember the Hoeven era and the going on 17 years, the Hoeven era and the Dalrymple era. And we've talked about this before, where there was going to be some faction, the NDGOP was going to split, the Democrats were going to take advantage, and Republicans were going to lose some ground. We've been talking about that happening for a while, and it just hasn't.
Yeah.
And part of what I think is that the Governor Burgum is going to try this. It's not going to work as well as he likes. I think he'll have some wins in some places and losses in others. And also we should remember that this whole thing doesn't hinge on Governor Burgum's money. Some of these lawmakers may lose because the voters in their districts just decide it's time for somebody else.
Fair enough.
That's a factor too. It's not all hinging on Burgum and Governor Burgum and his money, and the money of his friends and supporters. But I think what's going to happen, he's going to try it. It's going to be a mixed bag. And we're going to go back to business as usual. I don't think that much is going to change.
Yeah, I think if it's a mixed bag, like you're saying, I think I would agree with you in that context, Rob. But if he's more successful and wins most of these races, he's in the middle and gets it, that'll give him opportunity to double down. And I can tell you there will be a rise up within the conservative ranks that you might see a faction joining forces with the conservatives. Some of the conservatives, even though there's a lot of conservatives in the Bastia, they tend to be more libertarian, but there's not as many libertarians as there are conservatives. I think you're going to find some of those more center-right conservatives beginning to say, where do I fit in this party, and what does Governor Burgum want this to look like? And you might even find some conservative Democrats who've had about enough of the Democrats' far-left movement towards the Bernie Sanders of the world. And there might be a rising up, whether it just becomes a caucus, a broader caucus, or whether it comes down to another political party. I would hope it doesn't come down to another political party, because then that's where things will get messed up. But I do think you're going to see if the Governor Burgum is very successful in this, you're going to see a rising up of some things in the state with Republicans, in my opinion. And It's going to make for some not good news for Republicans. It's going to cost them at the polls long term, because at the end of the day, voters are happy with, for the most part, how Republicans have governed. And I believe that trend will continue, but they get really tired when you get petty in the campaign cycles. And that's where you might start seeing some changes occur after this cycle.
Oh, I think Governor Burgum needs to be very, very careful to not have this be, because even if he wins, if he's very successful, and a lot of the people that he's backing win, the problem is it's going to look like the governor bought them their elections. And that's going to hurt their ability, I think, to be effective as legislators. That's the thing he needs to avoid. It needs to be about those people winning and their platforms and that they persuaded voters, not that the governor dropped a bunch of money into their race. That's what it needs to be about. And that's, I think, where Governor Burgum's at risk of blowback. Listen, I care a lot less about factionalism than I used to. I don't know if I'm just getting old, Gary. My friend, the State Associated Press reporter James McPherson, told me at the last convention 2 years ago. He said, "Port, you're really mellowing out in your old age." And I don't know. Maybe I am. Maybe I am. Maybe I am. I don't know. I don't feel that mellow, but maybe I am. But I care a lot less about factioning. Is that I just want good policy. You know, like I want to build a coalition around, because that's ultimately what this is all supposed to be about. I care a lot less about personalities, I think, than I used to, which is why because that's why I'm struggling so much in the Trump era. Trump is all personality, right? I mean, that's just what it is.
Totally.
I
hate him I love him one day and I hate him the next. I tell you what, talk about a roller coaster.
I know.
It's a soap opera drama. I can't take
one day he's approving and we're going to get the Dakota Access Pipeline through, and it's like, yes, finally. And then the other day he's tweeting something about somebody, and it's like, oh God, stop, please. Or he's talking. One day he's talking during the COVID-19 virus. This is driving me nuts. One day we're talking about, we're going to leave it up to the states, right? States are going to take the lead, and the federal government's in a support role. And the federalist in me is like, yes, finally. Right? That's exactly what we want. And then the next day he's talking, I'm the president. I have supreme executive power. The states will open when I tell them to. It's like, Trump, you're contradicting yourself, my man. Pick a lane, pal.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to keep track of one comment to the next because it's such a switcheroo. I just can't take it. The problem is that he does pull you in and you watch the drama back and forth. And I went a couple months where I hardly watched anything or talk. I just ignored everything. And then eventually I get stuck back.
Oh, I get, and listen, I'm not above being petty. When he's riding herd on some of these White House press corps reporters, I'm just doing a slow clap at home on my couch, like, yes, yes, take those suckers down. And I say that I work for the news media. I very much believe in the importance of journalists, but mostly local journalists. The national press corps, I'm about ready to just write off because I think they suck.
Yeah.
Local reporters are wonderful. For them, I mean, imperfect and flawed as any group of people, but generally doing wonderful work. Well, Gary, I appreciate your time coming on. It's going to be interesting.
You bet, Rob.
I think you should come on more often, and we could talk more about this because it's.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's have fun. I like doing it. Let me know when you want to do it, and we'll do it again.
Sounds good, Gary. Thanks for your time.
Okay.